Ever found that your self-control is strong in the morning, but then wanes later in the day, maybe even completely diminishing by nighttime? Again, this phenomenon is due to self-control fatigue. Research shows, for example, that exerting self-control during the day, for example, controlling your mood at work, makes it likely that you'll have less self-control with regards to alcohol intake that night. Coping with stress all day, research shows, makes you more likely to cheat on your diet when you get home. In the morning, you might have the willpower to get out of bed and hit the gym. But after a long day of inhibiting yourself, watching what you say in front of your colleagues, saying no to the burger and fries at lunch in favor of a salad, and resisting the temptation to read some blog posts when you should be responding to work email, it's a lot harder to resist skipping your regular workout in favor of watching TV. One study even demonstrated that as the day goes on, we are more likely to engage in unethical behavior. In the morning, when our self-control is at its highest, we are less likely to act unethically compared to the end of the day. This morning morality effect, the researchers found, is in part due to decreasing self-control in the afternoon. A similar study found that people are more likely to cheat or act otherwise unethically after having to resist temptation. Perhaps self-control fatigue explains famous examples of people in high-intensity jobs who have shown major self-control failures. The press often highlights stories of politicians and high-level CEOs embroiled in extramarital or financial scandals. Their work demands are unusually intense, requiring great self-control. Their behavior has to be impeccable, their words calculated, their attention constant throughout long workdays. When the workload and pressure are this intense, and the need for self-control is so high, they eventually succumb to self-control fatigue at some point and make poor decisions. As I touched on in the last chapter, studies by late Harvard psychologist Daniel Wegner suggest another reason why the more self-control we exert, the more likely we are to lose control. In his theory coined ironic processes, he explains that the very act of suppressing a thought, the classic "don't think of a white bear," makes you monitor whether you're successful at suppressing that thought, thereby constantly bringing to mind the unwanted thought. Researchers have found that there is a physiological reason why self-control diminishes and then backfires. It physically fatigues us. Baumeister has shown that exerting self-control results in a significant drop in blood sugar levels. We know that the brain relies on glucose for nearly all its activities, and self-control appears to be particularly taxing. In turn, low blood sugar leads to poor self-control, thus explaining why our self-control waxes and wanes. Researchers have compared this loss of self-control to what happens after drinking alcohol. Alcohol, by reducing blood sugar, diminishes our ability to exert self-control. Low blood sugar leads to physical fatigue, explaining why we feel so drained at the end of a day at work, despite not having engaged in any vigorous physical exertion. Self-control and discipline are undeniably helpful. However, when we exert too much pressure on ourselves, we exhaust ourselves mentally and physically and become less likely to achieve our goal. Under any type of stress or burden, and the pressure we put on ourselves is itself a type of stress, we succumb to the very thing we want to avoid. High-intensity negative thoughts. High-intensity thoughts are a third factor that depletes our energy. Our thoughts have the capacity to significantly wear us out. I'm not just referring to the type of intense thinking you do when you are focused on a complex task. For example, analyzing data, writing a report, or managing the details of a project. The thoughts exhausting you most may not be directly related to your work. a tendency to worry and catastrophize on one hand, and beliefs about what is going to make you tired on the other. Worry and catastrophizing. You may not consider worrying a cause for fatigue, yet continuously having thoughts such as, "I'm never going to finish on time. What happens if I mess it all up? How will I ever get this done?" can significantly tax your energy. Not surprisingly, research shows that worrying is linked to fatigue. Why? Because by worrying, we are imagining and anticipating negative events. As a consequence, our stress levels elevate, and we enter a fight-or-flight state of physiological arousal. Our body believes it is in danger, and our nervous system is highly activated. Our heart rate rises, our palms sweat, our body prepares an immune response. The result? We get tired. It's often not the things on your to-do list that lead to stress. It's your worry about getting them done. For example, have you ever had an item on your list for weeks? Every time you think of it, you get anxious because you still haven't gotten to it. You keep making plans to do it, and it's always in the back of your mind. The very thought of it wears you out. Then, one day, you finally work on that task, and you have it done in an hour. It wasn't that big a deal, nor was it tiring. But for weeks now, it has been creating tension that has exhausted you. Worrying can also lead to rumination. For example, if you are treated unfairly by a colleague, when you come home, your mind may still be stuck at work, going over the situation and what you'll do about it tomorrow. Not only do these thoughts drain you mentally, but by disrupting your sleep, they also keep you from resting and recuperating. Worrying can also lead you to catastrophize, a term psychologists use that means having irrational fears that something terrible will happen. You might imagine worst-case scenarios. If I don't do well, I will lose my job, and then I will be homeless. Or when you make a small mistake, you might conclude that you are an utter failure. This kind of negative thinking unnecessarily raises stress levels, fatigues us even more, and brings us down. The result? You have drained your energy. Beliefs about fatigue. Finally, your beliefs about what tires you significantly contribute to the exhaustion you feel. In fact, Elliot Berkman points to groundbreaking research that shows that fatigue is often determined by your beliefs more than by actual physiological exhaustion. In a revealing study, Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck and colleagues measured whether people believed their willpower was a limited resource by asking participants to select whether they endorsed statements like, "After a strenuous mental activity, your energy is depleted, and you must rest to get it refueled again," limited resource theory, and "Your mental stamina fuels itself. Even after strenuous mental exertion, you can continue doing more of it," non-limited resource theory. They then measured participants' fatigue after they engaged in an energy-depleting task. She noticed that participants' beliefs determined whether their willpower diminished. If they believed their willpower would diminish, it did. In other words, if you believe that a task is fatiguing, it will be. In another study, participants either completed a tiring task or not, and were then given false feedback on how fatigued the task had made them. Those who were told that they were more tired performed worse on a subsequent memory task, regardless of whether they had completed the tiring task or not. Your beliefs about whether something is tiring are so powerful that they predict poorer performance. These case studies show that your energy levels can be dramatically influenced by your mind, in particular, your beliefs and thoughts about your work and how tiring it really is. If you go to work expecting to be depleted, you probably will be. I once had a colleague who hated the large events and conferences we routinely organized. He expected them to be exhausting. On event days, he would walk into the office saying, "It's doomsday." He was inevitably completely drained afterward and would have to take sick days. Other colleagues, on the other hand, looked forward to these large events. They did not show the same depletion effects. If this phenomenon sounds similar to the placebo effect, you are right. Research is uncovering more and more ways in which our minds determine our abilities and well-being, including how tired or refreshed we feel. When we push ourselves to the limit mentally, by experiencing high-intensity emotions, exerting too much self-control, or falling prey to worries and false beliefs about what makes us tired, we are draining the energy that is critical for us to do good work. When we are then faced with a challenge or critical task, we are too tired and our cognitive abilities are too compromised for us to perform at our best. The good news is that these habits can all be addressed. We can learn to manage our energy. The secret is to stay calm. Calm, the key to energy management. When we are tired for purely physical reasons, for instance, we ran a marathon, the fatigue usually lasts until our bodies have restored themselves. The solution is simple: rest. However, when the reason we are exhausted is psychological, rest doesn't always do the trick. We need to address these psychological factors at the level of the mind. But how? As we saw in Chapter 2, it's hard to control thoughts and feelings. Moreover, while research shows that negative thoughts drain our energy, attempting to control these thoughts leads to even more fatigue. This is where calmness comes into play. During World War II, the British government created posters to boost the morale of the citizens. One poster read, "Keep calm and carry on." This poster was meant to be displayed if the Germans invaded the United Kingdom. Recently, the "Keep calm and carry on" poster and humorous variations thereof have been popularized on t-shirts, coffee mugs, bags, and Facebook memes. However, there is more than meets the eye to this wise expression created by a British civil servant in the 1940s. Scientific findings suggest that calmness helps you conserve mental energy, allows you to exercise self-control without effort, and reduces the power of negative thoughts by providing perspective. How calm preserves your energy. In the West, we value high-intensity emotions. In fact, the only time we prefer low-intensity positive emotions like calm is as an antidote to stress and worry. We learn relaxation techniques to relieve stage fright. We take a warm bath to unwind after a hard work week, or we get a massage to help us recover after a particularly stressful work project is over. But we don't usually associate low-intensity emotions like calm with success. Calm can even seem counterproductive. We're calm when we're on vacation, at the beach, or on our mat at the end of yoga class. Not, it seems to us, when we're working on a deal, completing a big project on deadline, or teaching a seminar. Calm brings up images of passivity, laziness, lethargy, or ineptitude. However, being calm does not make you less productive, nor does it make you passive. Instead, being calm allows you to get your work done while spending less energy than you otherwise would. Because it is a low-intensity emotion, calm doesn't charge up your physiology. Your heart doesn't beat faster than normal, your palms don't sweat, and your breathing stays regular. Your body is at ease. As a result, instead of using up your energy throughout the day and depleting yourself rapidly, you conserve your energy and deploy it at will. You may be thinking that you really enjoy the kick of deadline-driven anxiety and excitement. It jolts you into action. Stress and excitement are energizers. That's how energy drinks got so popular, The caffeine elevates adrenaline, which is typically secreted in response to stress. But as I described earlier, just as we crash a few hours after drinking an energy drink, we also tire quickly after experiencing high-intensity emotional states. Of course, I'm not suggesting that you should never feel excitement or other high-intensity positive emotions. They bring us joy. But understanding the physiological impact of both positive and negative high-intensity emotions will allow you to deploy emotions more skillfully. Using the kick of high-intensity emotions when you see fit is one thing, but doing so all the time is a poor use of energy. Instead, use high-intensity emotions as tools when you need them. There are situations, perhaps in a team meeting you are leading, in which you want to inspire others and be highly enthusiastic and excited. In other situations, like when you are going through email, you might want to avoid getting amped up for such a mundane task. Using high-intensity emotions selectively and staying calm the rest of the time allows you to conserve energy over the long run. For example, do you give your all to every task you do? Are you a perfectionist who simply needs to get it all done well, and done now? Does everything really need to be absolutely perfect? Or can certain tasks be done well, while others are just fine with a little less attention and effort? While perfectionism is certainly valuable and can push you to do your best, it also has a dark underbelly because it leads to impossibly high standards and worrying that can lead to burnout. Perfectionism in the workplace, as opposed to in sports or education, leads to even greater risks for burnout. Because they have impossibly high standards, perfectionists live in a constant state of high stress. It is no surprise that perfectionism has been linked to suicidal thoughts, anxiety and depression, and poor performance. Staying calm will allow you to look objectively at how you approach work and to manage your energy accordingly. In many cases, satisficing is enough. Satisficing means accepting that good is good enough. You could spend all your energy on one work product, but understand that you will be exhausted in the face of subsequent responsibilities. I'm not suggesting you do a half-baked job, just that you don't expect perfection on every detail of every project. Some projects may not need the same degree of attention as others. Calmness will give you the perspective you need and will help you determine when good is good enough. You may think that being calm will prevent you from making the impact you want. However, staying calm does not prevent you from powerfully making your point. For example, I once volunteered to help organize a large speaker event. Thousands of people would be in attendance. Our leader, Tanuja LeMay, personified calmness. A long-time meditator, she was on top of everything and inspired everyone to do a great job. Yet she remained completely peaceful. At one point, she had to reprimand one of the staff members for making an error. I observed as she raised her voice and appeared frustrated. But somehow, I could tell she wasn't. When someone is angry, you usually can feel it. They may get red in the face, and you can practically sense their heart rate accelerating. Tanuja was outwardly stern and clearly communicated her disappointment. The person she reprimanded definitely got her point. Yet, when you observed Tanuja closely, you could see that she remained perfectly calm on the inside. As Tanuja stated the facts to the staff member, she communicated in a strong way, yet without bitterness. She wasn't wound up or deeply upset. 2 minutes later, she was laughing at a joke with that same staff member. She had moved on. Job done, but no energy was wasted. Why calm is the key to effortless self-control. We exercise self-control countless times during a regular workday, and in the evenings too, and it's exhausting us. When we experience high-intensity emotions like excitement or stress, we need extra self-control. because physiological arousal adds one more element to control. For example, your heart is pounding with anxiety over a presentation you have to make, and then you have to exert control not only over your words as you deliver your message, but also over your body so that you don't stutter or lose your train of thought. Calm states are the key to effortless self-control. Staying calm helps you be present with the task in which you are engaged, making it easier to avoid distractions. Paying attention happens naturally without any need for self-control. We have an intuitive understanding that if we remain calm, we will be better able to focus. In a study I ran, we invited 2 participants into the lab. The first participant was to follow the instructions of the second participant in a puzzle task. So the first participant had to listen carefully as his partner provided guidance. When I asked the first participant in each pair how they would like to feel during the task, they expressed a desire to feel calm. You have no doubt experienced that your thoughts stop racing when you are relaxed and at peace. Research confirms that your attention to the things around you becomes broader, more inclusive, and sharper when you are calm. You are able to take more in. Another reason why calm leads to effortless self-control is that you conserve energy, and thus you are less tired. As Baumeister's research shows, it is when we are fatigued and have drained our energy that self-control fails us. How calm reduces the impact of your thoughts. When you are calm, you are better able to control your thoughts and feelings. When we were babies, we focused on our internal world, sensing hunger or thirst, and feeling sleepy or scared. As we grow up, the internal world becomes increasingly foreign and distant as we prioritized the outside. As adults, we mostly focus on the external world, paying attention to the things that engage our senses: phones ringing, colleagues walking into the office to talk, urgent email messages, computer screens, newspaper articles, and delicious aromas. As adults, often we tune into our internal awareness, our thoughts and emotions, only when it sounds an alarm or takes us by surprise, as when we experience pleasure, "Wow, that tasted good," or pain, "Ouch." Maybe we suddenly notice a sore back or neck from sitting at the computer for too many hours at a stretch. Or we may realize our thoughts are racing with fear, or we suddenly get flush with anger, choked up with sadness, or weak-kneed with love. Although we don't pay much attention to it, internal awareness is far more important than most people realize. Given that negative thoughts and beliefs about what makes us tired have such a powerful effect on our energy levels, it is critical that we recognize them when they arise. Internal awareness allows us to observe these beliefs and thoughts, rather than let them run the show. You have a neural pathway dedicated to internal awareness in your brain. However, when you are physiologically wound up from high-intensity emotions, it may be harder to access this pathway because other parts of your brain are on high alert. Whether you are experiencing a caffeine high, have anxiety jitters, or are on top of the world with excitement, your thoughts are probably going a mile a minute. You are at the mercy of the state of your mind, your words and decisions a direct reflection of the stress in your system. As a result, your thought process is not as clear or rational as it could be, and you are more likely to act impulsively, saying or doing things you might later regret. If you are calmer, however, it is easier to tap into internal awareness and observe the mind's activity. You can notice when you are starting to get caught up in anxious and frenzied thoughts, and can consciously choose not to yield to those thoughts or to fuel them. Instead, you can observe your thoughts as if you were an audience member watching them on a screen. For example, instead of thinking, "I am worried that my boss will say X, Y, and Z at my annual review," repeatedly cycling through worst-case scenarios about what your boss could say, You might simply note, there's a lot of anxiety coming up right now, without adding fuel to the fire. Instead of thinking, I absolutely have to do a good job when I give my talk or I'll die of embarrassment, you note to yourself, I am catastrophizing again. When you are calm, you have greater control over your mind. Rather than engaging with those kinds of thoughts and feelings, you will choose to not interact with them. You don't resist them, since, as we've learned, resisting thoughts only makes them stronger. You simply accept that they are there without identifying with them. Your feelings are not driving you. Instead of being a slave to impulsive thoughts, you consciously decide what you are going to say or do. Instead of the negative and stressful thoughts draining you, you retain your energy. Eastern cultures have long held that calm is a source of immense strength and power. The Chinese term wu wei, or non-action, is described as the key to life in Taoism, its foundational text, the Tao Te Ching. This text advocates for wei wu wei, action without action. This sounds like a riddle, but it's a riddle pregnant with wisdom. One way of interpreting this phrase is that calmness is the inaction in the action. You may be in the middle of a critical client meeting or negotiating the deal of a lifetime, but inside you remain peaceful, calm, and grounded. As a consequence, you are more observant, listen better, communicate more skillfully, and make better decisions. Whether you win or lose, whether you succeed or fail, you come out on top. You remain centered and at ease. When you are calm, you are in a place of power. Because your mind is present, you are able to focus naturally. Calmness is a state in which you don't need self-control, because you already are in control. Why? Because you have volition over the state of your mind. As Sarah Severn, Senior Director of Systems Innovation, Sustainable Business and Innovation at Nike, shared with me, you have a choice about how you react to any circumstances around you. I can react with joy, I can react with depression or feeling like a victim, or I can look at this in a more neutral way as a teaching moment. The biggest influence you can have is to listen to your heart and your highest intention, rather than letting the mind run rings around you. If you can do that, the ego takes a back seat, and you can have a positive influence on others around you. When you are calm, you will not regret the actions you take, because rather than simply reacting to the world around you, you choose your actions. They are thoughtful and stem from a clear and objective state of mind. You work with ease rather than strain. You are relaxed rather than tense. Most importantly, you have managed your energy and are not burned out. How to cultivate calm. There will be days when you find it challenging to calm your mind, especially in emotionally charged situations or under tight deadlines. How do you nurture calmness so it becomes automatic? One of the best ways to do so is through meditation. Meditation, sometimes referred to as mindfulness, has grown in popularity over the past decade. It has been the subject of news articles, TV segments, and countless books, thanks to a growing body of research on its benefits. As a result, many extremely successful individuals, from TV personality Oprah Winfrey to CEO of Skoll Global Threats Fund Larry Brilliant, to music industry icon Russell Simmons, and to executive chairman of Ford Motor Company Bill Ford, have adopted meditation and consider it an indispensable practice in their lives, touting its benefits. One study showed that meditation can actually buffer you against the tiring effects of self-control. The researchers replicated Baumeister's classic experiment. Participants completed a task that depleted their self-control, then worked on a second challenging task. If their self-control was drained from the first task, they typically should do worse or give up more easily on the second task. In this study, the difference was that some of the participants meditated between the tasks, while others did not. The scientists found that the meditating participants performed as well on the second task as participants who had not completed the first task at all. Meditation, therefore, appears to be a useful tool to recharge your tank and prevent depletion after challenging tasks requiring self-control. Meditation has also been linked with reduced stress and anxiety, as well as enhanced emotion regulation, further helping us retain energy. If you've never tried meditation, you might be intimidated. In fact, it's one of the simplest exercises you can do. As a first step, simply close your eyes and turn your attention inward. In other words, rather than focusing on the world around you, the sounds, sights, smells, and so on, focus on what is happening inside your body and mind. It doesn't have to get more complicated than that. The simple act of looking inward for just a few minutes can be quite restorative. Start with 5 minutes at a time. Become aware of physical sensations first, any physical feelings in your body, the movement of your breath, your heart rate, the feel of the floor or your chair below you, the clothes on your body, and any jewelry or rings you are wearing. Then move your awareness to thoughts and feelings. Notice them without engaging with them, as if they were on a movie screen. Gradually increase your meditation time as you grow in confidence. An even simpler way to meditate is to focus on the breath, one breath at a time. This exercise can seem maddeningly boring, but you will find that, over time, the result is a much calmer state of mind. There are lots of meditation classes, books, and CDs that offer guidance on how to meditate, and that propose different techniques that might appeal to you. There are also a number of apps on the market, such as Sattva or Headspace, that offer meditations for beginners. If you are not ready for meditation, then simply choose a physical posture that invites calm. As we saw in Chapter 2, changing your physiology can dramatically change how you feel. A fascinating field of research called embodied cognition has demonstrated that just changing our bodily posture can shift our state of mind. There is real wisdom in the expression, "You might want to sit down," before hearing alarming news, or advice to sleep on a difficult problem. Let's say, for example, that you are wound up with anxiety or anger about something and can't figure out how to calm down. A brain imaging study out of Texas A&M showed that the simple act of lying down can reduce feelings of anger and hostility. Exercise and the breathing exercises described in Chapter 2 are other obvious ways of changing your physiology to calm your body and mind. You might also consider going to a gentle, awareness-based yoga or Tai Chi class, or even a stretching class. Make these practices part of your daily routine until internal awareness and calmness become second nature. Research studies suggest that the benefits of meditation-like practices build over time in cumulative fashion. The more you meditate, the more you reap the benefits, so that a state of calm starts to rule your day. How to restore your mental energy. Remaining calm will help you manage your energy so that it does not drain as quickly. However, there will be times when you are drained and need to restore mental energy levels. Managing mental energy means knowing when you need to replenish yourself without caffeine or high-intensity emotions. Here are some empirically validated ways to restore energy when it is depleted. Do something that makes you feel positive. In one study, participants who were shown a funny film clip or were given a surprise gift did not display fatigue after exerting self-control. Another demonstrated that, for religious individuals, prayer helped buffer against depletion. Research aside, you know best the kinds of activities that you find uplifting. Create a list and keep it handy, so you don't have to figure out what to do when you feel mentally exhausted. For example, if you're at work, replenishing your energy might mean going for a walk, taking a break, watching a funny YouTube video, looking at pictures of your loved ones, meditating, or engaging in a random act of kindness for a colleague. Turn what you're doing into something you want to be doing. There are lots of activities that involve effort but don't tire you. Why? Because you love them. Elliot Berkman reminds us, if you feel tired, but something really fun comes along, you all of a sudden have a second wind. Berkman, who admits to having a sweet tooth, told me that sometimes he gets home after a long day feeling exhausted and craving ice cream. If there is no ice cream in the freezer, he still is able to muster the energy to go buy it, even when it involves putting on a winter jacket and snow boots, shoveling the driveway, and warming up the car to drive to a store that is 20 minutes away. People have plenty of energy for the things they want to do. There is truth to this saying attributed to Confucius: choose a job you love, and you will never have to work a day in your life. Now, the problem is that we can't always choose to do what we love, either in our careers or in our personal lives. However, we can choose how we approach our work so we can enjoy it more. Rather than thinking of work as work, reframe it by thinking of what you love about it. Sound easier said than done? Here are a few research-backed suggestions. Remember the big picture. Focus on the why rather than the how of a task or job. For example, if you are working on a dissertation or launching a startup and you have lost your motivation and energy, remember why you are doing it. You are completing a dissertation because you are passionately interested in the topic and look forward to becoming a professor and teaching about it. Your startup will revolutionize your field and completely change the way people do things. Understanding how your work connects to what you care about and to your values will restore your energy. For example, if your company sells a certain device or product and you value making a difference in people's lives, you can think about how that device or product is helping people to fulfill their needs. Organizational psychologist Adam Grant, professor of management at the Wharton School of Business, has researched this effect. Grant studied a university call center in which employees made calls to raise money for financial aid. After Grant brought in one of the student recipients to explain what a big difference the aid had made in his life, there was a steep increase in productivity at the center. Why? Because the center workers were personally moved when they saw the impact their work was having. Their work became a mission with a purpose. What happens if you are toiling away at a desk job that you don't particularly like and that is not related to your passions for hiking and your family? In that case, think about how it is indirectly related to your passions. For example, you may be working long hours and taking on extra shifts because it provides income for your next trip to the Sierras. Or your job may be funding your child's college tuition account, or a big end-of-year family vacation. Remembering how your job allows you to indulge your passions will help you refocus on the big picture. You will go back to appreciating the job rather than experiencing it as a burden. When you focus on the big picture, you remember why you care about this work. As a consequence, you start to want to do what you are doing, rather than thinking you have to do it. It's the difference between what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, being motivated from within, for example, because you know it will make a difference or because you love doing it, and extrinsic motivation, being motivated by an external reason, like a boss who is breathing down your neck or the need to bring home a paycheck. Research has shown that when people are motivated from within because they love what they do, for instance, a basketball player who loves playing basketball, they do it without being told or pressured. It becomes a privilege and a joy to go to work. When you remember why you want to be doing your job, you won't need self-control to do it. In other words, you won't need to expend energy because you are not exerting self-control. Practice gratitude. Research has shown that feeling grateful helps you replenish your energy in the face of fatiguing tasks. Let's say you don't like your job. Regardless, there are always things that warrant being grateful. You have a job when many others don't. Maybe you enjoy some of your colleagues. Maybe there are perks and benefits. Berkman points out that the reason gratitude has such a great replenishing effect is that feeling grateful both increases positive emotion and helps you see the big picture. Detach from work when you're not working. Many people take work home with them at night or do it during their time off. As a consequence, the stress of the day blends into evenings and vacations and eats up recovery time. Sabine Sonnentag, professor at the University of Mannheim in Germany, has found that people who do not know how to detach from work during their off time experience increased exhaustion over the course of 1 year and are less resilient in the face of stressful work conditions. Sharon Lumley is a television news producer covering the White House, Capitol Hill, and breaking news for an international audience of 40 million. Although her professional life is based in Washington, D.C., Lumley chooses to live in Oregon. During breaking news events in D.C., her job is intense. However, when she returns home to Oregon, she remains intentionally out of reach, enjoying her family, hiking in the mountains, canoeing, or restoring her Victorian home. She doesn't check messages until she is at the airport just before returning to the East Coast. "The time I spend at home recharges me and reminds me of who I am," Lumley told me. "When I return to Washington, I'm able to handle the pressure and pace gracefully, bringing out the best in the news team." Because she has found that psychological detachment from work is particularly difficult when the job's workload and time pressure are high, Sabine Sonnentag stresses how critical it is to learn to consciously detach from work when it is highly demanding. Sonnentag has found that psychological distance from work is the fastest path to recovery and leads, surprisingly perhaps, to increased productivity. From our research, one can conclude that it is good to schedule time for recovery and to use this time in an optimal way. Activities that Sonnentag's research confirms help with detachment are exercise, walks in nature, and total absorption in a non-work-related hobby. Positively reflecting about your job after work hours can also help replenish you. In our busy and overwhelmed culture, we are often urged to manage time better. Time management apps, blogs, and workshops abound. We believe that if only we could manage our time, we would get more done and be happier. However, there are only so many hours in a day, no matter how neatly scheduled you are. A better focus, and one that few people understand, is energy management. How are you using the energy you have each day? Most people burn it unnecessarily on high-intensity emotions, self-control, and counterproductive thinking. The best way to manage energy is by cultivating calm. The result? Less stress, a clearer mind, and sharper focus to get your work done. You get the same amount of work done, but you remain balanced and enjoy the process. Because you are able to think more clearly, you do a far better job. The best part, of course, is that because you are not as tired, your energy levels remain high. As a result, you are happier and more successful. Chapter 4. Get more done by doing more of nothing. The secret to accessing creativity. Don't underestimate the value of doing nothing, of just going along, listening to all the things you can't hear, and not bothering. Pooh Bear in Pooh's Little Instruction Book. When he received the phone call notifying him that he had been selected to receive the Nobel Prize in Economics, Myron Scholes, professor emeritus at Stanford Graduate School of Business, was not holed up in his office working out equations or reading research papers. He was preparing for a day of golf after giving a breakfast talk. Many describe Scholes as nothing short of a genius. He is famous for developing innovative and groundbreaking theories in economics, including the Black-Scholes options pricing technology, which helped create the derivatives market and for which he was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1997. But when you ask him how he comes up with his novel insights, he attributes his creativity to time spent not working, such as during his daily meditations and walks. Scholes defies the stereotypical image of an academic deeply yet narrowly immersed in one field of study. He reads widely outside of his field and is always ready to discuss his latest favorite book. He is vivacious, curious, and insightful. Belying his age, he is youthful and lively. I always leave our conversations lighter and more inspired. How does Scholes do it? How is he so productive, insightful, and joyful all at once? We think successful people are those who are so completely dedicated to their fields that they focus exclusively on their field of expertise. They try to stay on top of every book, article, blog post, or research study published in their field. They think about their work constantly. They approach their work with intense concentration and attention, carefully crossing every T and dotting every I when they have a problem or issue they need to resolve. In short, they are focused. It's easy to see why most of us buy into the myth that single-minded attention is essential to success. After all, concentration, the ability to get completely absorbed in a task, approaching it with laser-sharp attention, is valued from grade school, pay attention, don't daydream, through work life. Our ability to stay focused on the task at hand is not only prized and rewarded, but absolutely required to get ahead and do well, or so we are told. Malcolm Gladwell, author of the best-selling book Outliers, popularized the idea that anyone can achieve mastery in a skill or art if they put in 10,000 hours of focused practice. Although the research behind this idea has since been called into question, it has nonetheless taken hold of the popular imagination. Why? Because it fits neatly with our theory that all we need to achieve greatness is single-minded focused attention. Practice makes perfect, right? Focus and concentration are, of course, undeniably important. The better you focus, the faster you absorb information. Whether you are learning a technical skill like a musical instrument or a computer software program, or an intellectual skill like how to succinctly synthesize concepts from multiple articles. We believe that the opposite of focus, daydreaming, goofing off, spacing out, is to be avoided. Worse yet, having problems focusing is seen as an obstacle to overcome, and even as pathological. We complain about having short attention spans. Newspapers ceaselessly report on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Self-help books and productivity bloggers strive to keep us on task with advice and hacks. When we fail to come up with the results we were hoping for, we wonder whether we just aren't working or concentrating hard enough. If we could only stay focused for hours on end as we work on this or that project, report, presentation, then we could get so much more done. We've come to consider focus and being on as good, and idleness, especially if it goes on for too long, as bad and unproductive. We feel guilty if we spend too much time doing nothing. The saying, "Idle hands are the devil's workshop," betrays our belief that having nothing to do inevitably leads to all sorts of bad things. The concept that idleness is bad is so deeply ingrained that many people, 84% of executives, for example, cancel vacations to work. In thinking this way, we make a fundamental mistake. Truly successful people, like Scholes, don't come up with great ideas through focus alone. They are successful because they make time to not concentrate and engage in a broad array of activities like playing golf. As a consequence, they think inventively and are profoundly creative. They develop innovative solutions to problems and connect dots in brilliant ways. Dwight Eisenhower logged more hours on the golf course than any other U.S. president, yet is also regarded as one of the best presidents the United States has ever had. He had a rule on the golf course. Except in the case of emergency, there was to be no talk of politics. Explaining his reasons to a potential presidential candidate, he said, "Young man, let me tell you something. You are going to work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for the government, and you are going to think you are doing your job. Here's what I want you to know. If that's what you do, there is no way you'll be able to do your job." The power of creativity. According to a 2010 IBM survey of more than 1,500 CEOs spanning 60 countries and 33 industries, CEOs believe that the most important skill needed to navigate today's complex business world is creativity. The CEOs ranked creativity even higher than rigor, management, discipline, vision, and even integrity. Whether you are a flight attendant juggling family life with travel, a computer engineer developing a new app, or a mom trying to get her children to eat vegetables, creativity is at the heart of what makes you successful. Creativity helps you find better ways to complete your work and come up with novel ideas that make you better at what you do. Some of the most inventive people in our society have claimed that their game-changing insights arose out of daydreaming or irrelevant and mindless tasks. In 1881, famed inventor Nikola Tesla had fallen seriously ill on a trip to Budapest. There, a college friend, Anthony Zaghetti, took him on walks to help him recover. As they were watching the sunset on one of those walks, Tesla suddenly had the insight, rotating magnetic fields, that would lead to the development of modern-day's alternating current electrical mechanism. Similarly, Friedrich August Kekulé, one of the most renowned organic chemists in 19th century Europe, discovered the ring-shaped structure of the organic chemical compound benzene in a daydream, the famous circular symbol of a snake eating its own tail. Composer Ludwig van Beethoven famously said that music just came to him. "Tones sound and roar and storm about me until I have set them down in notes." Even Albert Einstein attributed insight to something beyond linear thinking and logic alone. He turned to music, Mozart in particular, when he was grappling with complex problems and needed inspiration. He is quoted as saying, "All great achievements of science must start from intuitive knowledge. I believe in intuition and inspiration. Imagination is more important than knowledge." More recently, Woody Allen credits taking showers with helping him unblock ideas. And in her TED Talk, Elizabeth Gilbert, author of the bestseller Eat, Pray, Love, describes the apparent muse or creative genius that seems to alight unexpectedly upon writers, songwriters, and poets when they are in the midst of doing something unrelated to their art. In a time and age when everyone is overscheduled and overfocused, creativity is more and more prized. It's the key to your effectiveness and success in life and in business, and it can be a never-ending source of joy and happiness. How doing nothing leads to creativity. Research shows that there are two main modes of thought: intense focus on the present to achieve current goals, and downtime when we can daydream, let our minds wander, and come up with new ideas. While we give a lot of attention to the former, the latter is actually the secret to creativity. In Chapter 1, I discussed the importance of being present with what you are doing and of not mind-wandering during an activity, such as work or interactions with other people. In this chapter, however, I discuss the importance of a different kind of mind-wandering, purposeful mind-wandering, that is, choosing to take idle time to let your mind unfocus. Scott Barry Kaufman, scientific director of the Imagination Institute at the University of Pennsylvania and author of Ungifted and Wired to Create, explains that being idle and letting your mind wander constitute the optimum state for inventive thought and new perspectives. Kaufman points out that the two kinds of thinking, linear and creative, align with different neural networks in the brain. The first involves conscious focus on an activity, while the second, sometimes called the default network because it is activated when we are just relaxing, involves thoughts, fantasies, daydreams, and memories that arise when we aren't focused on a particular task. According to Kaufman, we don't want one of these neural systems to be overactive at the expense of the other. Ideally, we would have the ability to switch flexibly from one to the other according to circumstances. Other studies confirm this idea. Research by University of California, Santa Barbara's Jonathan Schooler and colleagues found that you are more creative after you have been daydreaming or letting your mind wander. Their study showed that when people learn a challenging task, they do better if they work first on an easy task that promotes mind wandering and then go back to the challenging task. Here again, the idea is to balance both kinds of activities, idleness and focus, and to switch between the two to get optimum output. We need a balance of both focus and rest, because if our minds are constantly processing information, perhaps because of our non-stop schedule and the demands placed upon us by technology, we never get a chance to let our thoughts roam and our imagination drift. If we don't give our minds a break, they cannot engage in the kind of idle activity that leads to creative inspiration. A study by Marika Veit and Rose Zaks confirms that rest is critical for creative thinking. The researchers found that morning people are most creative in the evening, whereas night owls have their biggest breakthroughs in the morning. It might sound counterintuitive, but it also makes sense. The mind can finally drift when the brain goes into a sleepy, relaxed alpha wave mode. Salvador Dali famously engaged in sleep with a key, in which he would let himself doze off with a key between his fingers and a metal plate below it. When he fell asleep, the key would fall to the ground with a clang, waking him up. He believed that those moments between wake and sleep, a state called hypnagogia, kindled his creativity. These studies suggest that we become more imaginative and visionary by taking time out for ourselves, engaging in purposeless or idle pastimes, giving ourselves the space to be quiet and still, and finding time to have some fun. These three activities help us engage in relaxed mind wandering with no immediate to-do to worry about. You may be doing something that doesn't demand a lot of intellectual resources, such as taking a walk, stamping envelopes, or even doing the dishes. But in fact, you are creating inner stillness and room to think. As a result, the insights you need may percolate through. The greatest creative ideas don't come from obsessive 7 days a week constant focus on a problem, shared Kaufman. Managers and employees need to understand that creative insights are not going to come from such conscious deliberation. They come from integration with more free-floating ideas and emotions that arise during leisure time, daydreaming, recollection of memories, and other connections to your own internal world. Why your creativity is MIA. For many, the state of idleness described by Kaufman can be difficult to access. While we all have creative potential we can access, most of us have simply forgotten how to access it because our education and hectic lifestyle overemphasize linear thinking. How education buries natural creativity. Children are undoubtedly the most creative people in our society. They turn living rooms into fortresses, involve stuffed animals in elaborate plots involving heroes and villains, and talk to imaginary friends. Children can turn any situation, whether they are sitting in a waiting room or walking to school, into an opportunity for daydreaming and play. Games emerge out of whatever tools or things they have at their disposal, a running river, a stick or object, a pen, a paper doll, or a bouncy ball. In fact, kids have come up with inventions as diverse as popsicles, trampolines, and earmuffs. Children's thoughts and ideas flow freely, unrestricted by the demands adults place upon themselves. For example, while waiting at the bus, they might pretend that sticks they find are swords, imagine kingdoms in piles of leaves, or see animals in cloud shapes, while we adults check email, rework our to-do list, send a text, replay an incident that happened at work, or plan the upcoming day. As Pablo Picasso famously said, "All children are artists. The problem is staying an artist when he grows up." If we all have the ability to be creative masters as children, our creative genius must be innate. So where did it go? Our education buried it. We lose touch with our unbounded childlike mind because both education and professional training impose boundaries, discipline, and rigor on our thinking. Our minds learn to operate in a linear fashion and to reason logically. Great skills, of course, but skills that curb creativity when they are overemphasized at the cost of imagination and inventiveness. Research on divergent thinking, a fancy academic term for creativity, highlights the impact of education on our creativity. Divergent thinking refers to the ability to come up with diverse solutions to a problem. It is basically stream of consciousness brainstorming. Some of the solutions you come up with may not help solve your problem, but unexpected ideas and connections between concepts emerge that can inadvertently lead to an innovative solution. Convergent thinking, on the other hand, is the process of coming up with a solution through logical and linear reasoning, through what is already known. What do we learn in school? Convergent thinking. George Land, author of Grow or Die, suggests that this kind of training dramatically reduces our natural creativity. He studied a group of 1,600 children at several points in their youth using a test of divergent thinking that he had developed for NASA. He found that between 3 and 5 years of age, 98% of the children ranked as divergent thinking geniuses. Between 8 and 10 years of age, that number had dropped to 32%. Between the ages of 15 and 18, the number had dropped down to 10%. When Land tested a group of 20,000 25-year-olds, he found that only 2% could think divergently. Land concludes that while creativity is naturally present at a young age, we unlearn it through our education system. While Land's study has not yet been published, other peer-reviewed published studies using different creativity tests are arriving at similar results. In July 2010, Dr. Kyung-hee Kim, a professor at the College of William and Mary, prompted an international dialogue on the creativity crisis and the importance of creativity in education and business when she published some alarming statistics showing a decline in creativity in today's youth. She found that creativity remained static or declined after the 6th grade, and that since 1990, there has been a steady decline in creativity scores while IQ scores have risen. Kim concludes that people in general are becoming less able to think creatively, and they are less tolerant of creativity and creative people. Especially younger children are less able to think creatively. Interestingly, Kim found that there is a negligible correlation between creativity and IQ tests. In other words, even if we hone the skills that help us score high on an IQ test, the linear thinking skills we are taught in school, such as memory and reasoning, those skills do not necessarily mean we will be able to come up with groundbreaking inventions. Of course, linear thinking is certainly a skill everyone needs, but it should not be honed to the exclusion of creativity, which is also essential for success. No time for nonlinear thinking. In addition to schools and workplaces which value linear thinking alone, we live our lives with so little room for non-linear thought that even when idle moments presents opportunities for creativity, we fail to take advantage of them. When we are not focused on the important stuff, like the requirements of career and family, our attention is in constant demand. We are overstimulated, often by a constant bombardment of technology, which places a heavy burden on our attention. As a consequence, many people spend every waking moment focused. Everyone around us, our supervisor at work or our friends and family, expects us to be available all the time through our electronic devices. Interruptions from the various devices we use, text alerts, cell phone calls, and chats, impede idle contemplation. Even worse, our minds have become trained to constantly check our devices and inboxes. This habit has become so insidious that we even interrupt ourselves. You may notice that you automatically switch windows to check your email every so often, and the same goes with your phone. Nonlinear thinking requires some level of mind wandering and reverie, but our internal alerts to check our email and phone needlessly end up short-circuiting this process. Whereas in the past, we might have daydreamed while commuting to work on public transportation or standing in line at the grocery store. Now we compulsively check email just in case, or browse Facebook for no good reason. As a consequence, we keep ourselves focused every moment of the day. Moreover, our days are packed to the brim. Our to-do lists are longer than ever, and our schedules are tightly filled with work meetings and non-work activities, from going to the gym, to volunteering, to book clubs, to picking up the kids from daycare. We try to squeeze productivity out of every hour of the day, not wanting to lose any precious time, and trying to stay on top of our to-do lists. Even when schedules and work and social demands leave room for idle time conducive to nonlinear thinking, the concept of idle time has become so foreign that we get bored or uncomfortable whenever we are faced with it. We get anxious or antsy when we have nothing to do. So we turn right back to our devices and technology or entertainment like television or online videos to occupy that idle time, rather than spend time reflecting, relaxing, or engaging in daydreaming. Whether we are standing in line at an airport or in a waiting room at the doctor's office, our tendency is to flip through a magazine, watch the pervasive TV screens, talk or text on the phone, or browse the internet on our devices. Professor Timothy Wilson at the University of Virginia began noticing people's discomfort with being by themselves and decided to run several studies in 2014 to test how people feel about being alone with their thoughts. He gave participants the option of spending 6 to 15 minutes alone with their thoughts or doing a mundane and boring task. He found that overwhelmingly, people preferred the mundane task to being alone with their thoughts. Most tellingly, in one study, he gave participants the option of self-administering electric shocks, if they wished, during the thinking portion of the experiment. The researchers found that a large number of people, even those who rated the shock as very unpleasant and said they would pay money not to feel it again, preferred giving themselves electric shocks to sitting in a room alone with their thoughts. In short, the researchers concluded that most people seem to prefer to be doing something rather than nothing, even if that something is negative. In an effort to maximize productivity by staying focused and occupied throughout the day, we've left no room for the one thing that can help us succeed and truly be productive: non-linear thinking and creativity. Geniuses, on the other hand, know that insights and inventions depend on a wandering mind, unconstrained by logic. The creative process requires an openness of mind, not confined by rigidity, boundaries, rules, or other mental constraints. So while we believe that success stems from staying focused and being productive nonstop without a minute wasted, the truth is that success depends in large part on unfocusing, relaxing rather than working, and finding time to do nothing, opening up the space in our lives that our brains need for creative processes. How can we do that? The 3 paths to creative idleness. Purposely letting the mind drift into idleness is a big challenge for most of us, because even when we have free time, our minds have a hard time shutting off thoughts about work, worries, and so on. Some people fear that embracing idleness will make them lazy, or they feel it may get in the way of getting things done. We are so used to linear thinking that, given time alone, we might draw up a to-do list, a grocery list, or some other plan. Despite the ease with which we accessed it as a child, reaching a state of mind that is not caught up in constant, productive activity can be challenging as an adult. We have to, in essence, relearn how to be idle. Practically speaking, there are 3 ways to access our potential for creativity: learning to unfocus through diversification, making time for stillness and silence, and inviting fun back into our lives. Unfocus through diversification. Experts suggest that the key to being idle or to unfocusing is to diversify our activities rather than being constantly focused on a single task. To get a new perspective on something, we actually need to disengage from it. We can diversify in 2 ways: through mindless tasks or through a broader set of experiences. Diversifying with mindless tasks. Kaufman recommends breaking up time spent assimilating information and working on a task by inserting 15-minute periods of more mindless and less focused activity, taking a shower or going for a quick walk without concentrating on your cell phone, or doing some stretching. By taking that 15-minute period for mindlessness or daydreaming, your attention has been broadened and your mind is now able to make more creative connections between ideas. This cannot happen when you stay overly focused on a problem, explains Kaufman. Walking, in particular, appears to boost creativity. In a study appropriately titled, "Give Your Ideas Some Legs," researchers found that both during the walks and right afterward, people scored higher on several different creativity tests. Kaufman clarifies that we should not stop focusing on the problem we are working or the solution we are seeking altogether. Rather, he encourages us to make room for unfocused and idle time between periods of focused attention. After all, insight does favor the prepared mind. Kaufman explains that, traditionally, creativity researchers believed there are 3 stages to creative problem solving. Mastery, where you learn information and fine-tune your skills. Inspiration, where you switch to a mindless task or enjoy some idle time. Refinement, where you refocus on the original problem and re-engage in linear thinking to fine-tune your solution. For example, when I was putting together this chapter, mastery helped me dive into the science of creativity, speaking to experts in the field and interviewing highly creative individuals. Inspiration came on hikes I took. During those times, the logic, flow, and sequencing of the chapter would effortlessly emerge. Refinement involved carefully editing the chapter to be as clear as possible for the reader. Management experts Kimberly Elsbach and Andrew Hargadon of the University of California at Davis suggest that, for maximum creativity, you should organize your workday schedule so that it alternates highly focused and demanding tasks with more mindless ones. Give yourself and those around you more room to breathe and a more diverse workload that alternates low-focus tasks, plugging in numbers, formatting a presentation, cleaning up your desk, with high-focus tasks, writing an article, preparing a PowerPoint presentation, leading a meeting. Wharton professor Adam Grant warns us not to confuse tasks that are less intellectually demanding with tasks that are leisurely. For example, while we may think checking Facebook and reading a magazine are activities that rest our brains and allow us to enter an idle state, they actually require a great deal of concentration. What you want is partially focused attention, Grant explains. For example, for a white-collar worker, if you can fill at least part of your day with data entry into a spreadsheet or that kind of task, it gets you into a rhythm and routine where you are only partly focused, making it more likely that you will think more clearly and innovatively later. Doing something boring to think more creatively sounds counterintuitive, but it works. When the mind is partially engaged, its resources are not overly taxed. It is free enough to forge unexpected, intriguing connections and to allow original ideas to bubble up to the surface. Diversifying by broadening your horizons. Diversification can also mean slightly broadening experiential and intellectual horizons. According to Kaufman, anything that violates expectations of how the world works can boost creativity. For example, a semester spent studying abroad boosts students' creativity. Why? New experiences that disrupt our usual way of life and show us a different perspective make us more mentally flexible or creative. Myron Scholes, whose story opened this chapter, is an ardent believer in diversification. Though he is an economist by training, Scholes doesn't spend day and night on math problems and market analysis. By reading widely outside of his academic field, he is able to apply principles from other disciplines, such as psychology, philosophy, and history, to his innovative analyses of human behavior. Scholes' secret is that he does not over-concentrate on a problem or limit himself to the study of one academic area, but instead spends time learning about other fields and engaging in activities that have nothing to do with his profession. You can't spread yourself too thin, but it is essential to diversify your interests. Of course, if you diversify completely, you get nothing. But if you over-concentrate, you have no degrees of freedom, Scholes explains. You need some concentration and some diversification. Scholes' ideas that we need concentration and diversification might explain the fascinating dynamics behind Innocentive, a crowdsourcing platform. Innocentive crowdsources genius solutions to complex problems submitted by research and development companies, from creating car accessories to enhance the driving experience, a challenge submitted by Ford, to techniques for creating Earth independence, whereby humans are able to survive in space for longer periods, a challenge submitted by NASA. Anyone can submit a solution. Each challenge has a price tag attached. The winner can receive financial compensation in the range of $10,000 to $1 million. A research study out of Harvard, headed by Im Lakhani, established that there was a higher probability of someone solving a problem submitted to Innocentive if that person was not an expert in that particular field, but was in a field that was marginally or not at all related.
This is the end of the disc. The audiobook continues on the next disc.